people working in social practice. And we've been partnering with the Wake and Winston-Salem community now for several months, running panel discussions, getting to know you all in the community, and gearing up for a very exciting series of in-person gatherings in the fall, which will culminate with our Idea City Festival first weekend in October 2nd. And shortly after that, we can kind of think of this, if this program is exciting to you, and if ideas and the kind of generation of new business concepts and kind of a fresh start in the post-COVID world is something that's on your mind, we would love to invite you to participate or apply to join our camp program, which will be happening in November, the 9th through 11th. Lots more to share about that coming up. And I think all that I would like to add to what Donovan said in his beautiful welcome is, that in this moment of starting to see the light at the end of this long tunnel that has been the COVID-scape, what better time to start kind of getting out of our own way and thinking about fresh ideas, and also treating ideation as a methodological exercise. And with that, I'm so excited to turn it over to Dan Cohen, who has been doing really pioneering work in this field. Professor Dan, over to you.
Kelsa, thank you so much to you and to Donovan for what a great introduction and start to our session together today. As mentioned, my name is Dan Cohen. I am proudly the John C. Whitaker Executive Director of Entrepreneurship. I say proudly because John has been a terrific mentor and friend to me and to the whole Winston-Salem community. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to be here to share the ideate method with the group. And so we're gonna go through a method that is empirically proven to help you spot, evaluate, and select ideas that are significantly more innovative than the previous gold standard for teaching ideation. So this method, that's a long-winded way of saying this method is quite well vetted and it's empirically proven. And so I look forward to getting into it and sharing it with the group today. As we go forward, if you have any questions, please feel free to chat questions if we can do that. And then if not, there will be a Q&A session at the end. So if you want to, if it's more comfortable to kind of jot your questions down and ask them at the end, then that works well. So what I want to accomplish today with our group is I want to cover the basic building blocks of the ideate method, what it is, how it works, why it works, and then provide an opportunity for us to share the sense of community and spend some time in groups where you can get to know each other and network a little bit, and put into practice the ideate method in developing some valuable ideas that would be relevant to Winston-Salem. And then at the end, we'll come back together and we will debrief and discuss, and we'll do Q&A to end the session. So that's what we have on tap this afternoon. So let's dig in and talk a little bit about the ideate method. And it is an empirically proven method. It's a methodology. If you follow it step by step, you will generate 100 ideas, and we'll also teach you a method of evaluating. So we think that if you've done this well, the hardest part of the ideate method is narrowing it down to choosing the most innovative idea that you want to pursue. In terms of research, we did a natural experiment, which is the most rigorous empirical test. And what we did was we taught 3 classes using the ideate method, and then we taught 3 classes using the SEEK method, which was the previous gold standard for teaching ideation in college and university environments. And so 3 classes taught with ideate, 3 classes taught with SEEK, and then we asked students to narrow it down to their 3 best ideas and to write a paragraph about each. And then we had researchers at other universities using the Kieran Innovation Index rate each idea in terms of its innovativeness. And these researchers had no idea the source of whether it came from the ideate method or the SEEK method. They just simply reduced the idea to an innovation number. And then we had researchers at another university do the t-test to compare the ideate and seek method, again, with no idea which was ideate, which was seek. It was completely randomized. And it turned out that the ideate method yielded ideas that were significantly more innovative than the previous gold standard, the seek method. So this initially became an academic paper that was published in Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal. It is a top-tier journal. And I was joined by co-authors Dan Su from North Dakota State University and Rachel Shinar from App State. And then Sage heard about the paper and reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in developing it into a book. And I did. I was joined by my colleague at Wake Forest, Greg Poole, and also Heidi Neck from Babson College in Boston. And so, the method is well researched, it's well vetted, and I think equally important, before this became a method that was empirically tested, it was my way of teaching entrepreneurship. And prior to coming to Wake Forest, I was at Cornell University for a long time, and I founded eLab, which is Cornell's startup accelerator. We launched over 30 ventures that raised over $300 million worth of venture capital. And then when I came to Wake, Greg Poole and I refined it into a replicable method, and we began teaching it in the Center for Entrepreneurship at Wake Forest. And in the last rendition of Startup Lab, we had 5 Startup Lab teams raise external capital. The first time that's happened in Wake Forest history. So I think it's equally important to note that this method works in practice. It's not just something that's empirically proven, but it has a lot of practical testing behind it as well. So this is an overview of the method, and ideate is an acronym, and each letter signifies an important part of the method, and we're going to go through each of the methods. So right now, I'll just simply introduce them. The I stands for identify, and we want to help nascent entrepreneurs or developing entrepreneurs be able to develop a sense of smell around what makes an idea valuable. D stands for discover. It's super important to learn where the valuable ideas are hiding so you can uncover them. E stands for enhance, which is how do you take a good idea and make it a great idea. A stands for anticipate, and anticipate is the real engine or the real driver behind the ideate method, because all entrepreneurial ideas seem to source from change, right? And we're going through this enormous societal change right now in dealing with COVID. And of course, we could for hours talk about the pain points and the challenges associated with COVID, but hiding within those pain points and in those challenges lies opportunity, because change drives opportunity. T is for target. In order for you to develop a valuable idea, you have to have a customer or an end user in mind, because that helps you customize the idea. And then E, as I mentioned earlier, is evaluate. And we think this is the hardest part of the method. If you have developed 100 really good ideas, how in the world do you figure out which is the one to really go all in on and put your time and effort in on? And so the evaluate part, we think, is the toughest part of the method. So the goal of the ideate method is to generate 100 ideas. And then from there, it's a matter of narrowing it down till you pick the one that you are most passionate about, that you have the most belief in, and that you want to pursue. So let's talk about these parts in a little bit more detail, so that when we get to the part where we break out into groups, you'll have something behind you in terms of understanding this method, so you can go ahead and apply it. So identify is helping entrepreneurs develop a sense of smell around what makes an idea valuable. Okay, so I love the example of aspirin versus vitamins. Okay, if you have a splitting headache, chances are you're not going to be very productive. You're not going to be enjoying your day so much. So you're likely to solve that problem by going and taking a couple of aspirin. On the other hand, vitamins have an effect as well on your health, but there's something that you have to take over time for it to have an effect, and it's a little bit harder to determine the cause and effect, the value of the vitamins, versus aspirin, which is solving an immediate problem. And so what we want, we believe in fact, we know empirically that when people have a problem that they need to solve, they're way more likely to solve it than something that is more of a nice to have. So in this example, the aspirin represents the need to solve, whereas the vitamins represent a kind of a nice to have. And the goal is to find migraine headache problems. If you find migraine headache problems, people are likely to solve them because though I've never had one, and hopefully I never will, I've heard that they are not much fun to deal with. So when you have a migraine headache, you want it to go away quickly. So what makes these problems valuable or worth solving? One is that the world really needs it. Unfortunately, a lot of new ideas already exist, and the entrepreneurs will put a lot of time, effort, and take some risk into trying to put an idea out into the world that's already out there. And it's really difficult to get traction if there's something like it in the market space. And so a lot of times ideas are started and the world doesn't really need it. So to do some homework up front and make sure that the world really needs it is important. The pain is acute versus a minor inconvenience. People want to solve it. It's a migraine headache. They want it to go away versus something that's more of a minor inconvenience. Another indication is that people are already spending money on an unsatisfactory solution. And I will give an example of that a little bit later on as we get into it, but that is a really telltale sign that you're onto something valuable if people are spending money on a solution that's inferior. That means that they think it's a big enough problem to spend money on it. The problem cannot be solved in 5 minutes. If it's a simple to solve solution, then the problem is not very valuable and it probably won't get much traction. And then finally, a high barrier to entry exists. Not everyone can enter simultaneously. And so, interestingly, when it comes to new ideas that get launched in the marketplace, the two most commonly started ideas are retail and restaurants. And I think that they're started because people are familiar with these ideas and they know how to cook. And so they think, okay, I know how to cook. It's not much of a leap to figure out how to start a restaurant, and nothing at all against starting a restaurant or starting a retail business. But if you do that, you need to know that those two industries have the highest failure rate and the lowest profit potential. And so, and that's in large part because a lot of people can enter the market. There are low barriers to entry. So lots of people can get into starting a restaurant or starting a retail business, which means there's a lot of competition, which means that consumers have lots of choices, and that makes the idea less and less valuable over time, okay? And so what happens is that most people do not develop this sense of smell around what makes ideas valuable, and they launch ideas that the world doesn't really need, that have low barriers to entry, for example, retail and restaurants, and are minor inconveniences rather than major headache problems. Okay, so that's a bit around what makes ideas valuable. And then it's a matter of figuring out where these ideas are hiding. Okay, and so I am an avid fly fisherman. I love to go fly fishing. And if you go to a fly fishing stream with someone that really knows what they're doing, they're going to pay attention to a lot of things that tell them where the fish are hiding. So they're going to go and they're looking for a piece of water, and they're looking for deep underlying currents because the fish can hide in there, and they're looking for the direction that the water is moving because they want to present the fly where the fish can see the fly, as opposed to behind the fish where the fish can't see the fly. And so people that really know what they're doing in fly fishing are very much targeting specific parts of that stream to go after fish. If you go with somebody that has never been fly fishing before, they'll probably just start trying to cast and throw that fly into any part of the stream. They probably won't have very much luck because they don't know where the fish are hiding. This method is designed to help you find out where the valuable ideas are hiding. Okay, and so some ideas are: have you seen an idea that's working really well in another geographic region? Could be a different part of the country, or if you've traveled abroad, maybe you studied abroad in college, or you went on a recent trip, then you can look at ideas that are thriving in other regions of the country or the world and think, well, I could bring that idea back to my area. And so, for example, there's a gentleman by the name of Howard Schultz, and he was studying abroad in Italy, and he loved the Italian espresso cafe. He loved to go in there and have some cappuccino and have a pastry at the end of the day. And when he got back to Seattle, Washington, he couldn't find anything like that. And so he said, okay, I'll do my own thing. And that is what led us to Starbucks. Howard Schultz, of course, is the founder of Starbucks. Couldn't find the Italian espresso concept, so he created Starbucks. Okay. And then, so one area is to simply pay attention to your surroundings when you travel and look for ideas that are working in other environments and bring them to your local environment. And then another is to pay attention to activities that you're very passionate about. As I mentioned, I'm very passionate about fly fishing. I'm also passionate about playing golf. And when I ideate, I like to think about things that I'm passionate about because I love to spend my time thinking about and engaging in those activities. And if you do that, you'll probably uncover some things that are missing, or some things that could make the experience even better, or some problems that are associated with the experience that you could solve. So for instance, Nick Woodman and his girlfriend were very avid surfers, and they heard about this great movie made in the 1960s called Endless Summer, which was a bunch of surfers that followed the seasons, and they just followed the sun, and they were surfing for a whole year, and they filmed it, and it became kind of a cult classic film. They went out to do the same thing, and they were surfing all around the world, and they wanted something to memorialize this great trip. And so what they were doing is they took an old VHS camera, like a camcorder, and they put it in a sandwich plastic bag, and they were trying to record underwater in a sandwich bag, and it worked okay, but it wasn't ideal. And of course, this led to the creation of the GoPro, which in its first year sold over $300 million worth of these GoPro cameras that would allow you to capture your adventure. And so Nick Woodman discovered the GoPro by trying to solve his own problem of memorializing his great surfing trip. So pay attention to businesses that you see working well in other environments and bring them to your home environment. And also look deeply at areas and activities that you're passionate about, and pay attention to what might be missing, or what might accentuate that experience, or what problems exist there that you could solve. That's discover. E, enhance, take a good idea and make it better, okay? And this is a lot of times the word innovation is used here. That's where you take something good and make it great. And I have an example here. Silent disco goes mainstream. I had a student that studied abroad in Australia, and there's a phenomenon down there called silent disco. And that's where everyone is wearing headphones, and it's all run through software. And so if you walk by a silent disco, you would see people partying and dancing and having a great time, but you wouldn't hear a thing because the whole thing is run through their headphones. And so he thought it was super cool. And when he got back to the United States, he licensed the technology for the entire United States. And he started doing silent discos here in the United States, which would be the discover method, right? He saw something working in Australia, he brought it to the United States. However, it didn't really catch on in the United States. It was more of a fad, and he did his share of events, but it didn't really turn into a real business. So now he's got this technology, he's got these great headphones, and he said, well, you know, I wasn't able to turn it into a business with silent disco, but I wonder, could I enhance this idea and make it better? And so he started to talk to people about headphones and other uses. And he found out that in senior assisted living facilities, a really popular social event is movie night. And in senior facilities, sometimes some of the people that live there have issues with hearing. And the way they were solving this problem was they just turn up the volume. And if you turn it up too loud, it actually distorts the sound. And those that can't hear so well can't hear any better. And those that don't have an issue with hearing don't really enjoy it because it's so loud. And so it turned out that Jake Reish is his name. He took the silent disco and he enhanced it, and he developed it so that it could make movie night great. And he was able to raise $3 million, and now he's scaled this, and this is goes across the entire United States. It's called Eversound. And he just took an idea, the silent disco, he enhanced it, and he made it so that seniors living in assisted living facilities could enjoy the movie a lot more. And he actually solved a real headache problem, because when you're facing a hearing impairment, it's really a big problem, because people tend to isolate when they can't hear, and they don't want to disturb others and say, what did she say, or what did he say? And so a lot of times people like that can withdraw, and they can become very depressed. And so he was really solving a big societal problem with Eversound. So he took an idea and that was good, and he made it an idea that was great. And then let's template this a little bit. So you had Netflix, which took the idea of going to Blockbuster and renting a movie and changed that to where they would just mail DVDs to the home, which later became stream DVDs to your TV, so you don't have to leave the home. They took a good idea and they made it better. And then with the success of Netflix came things like the Dollar Shave Club, Casper, the selling of mattresses, and Smile Direct. And so this whole notion of selling direct to consumers was kind of started by Netflix. And then you say, okay, well, if it's working for movie rental, why wouldn't it work for shaving needs or dental needs or mattress needs or any other needs that you have out there? So you can simply, in terms of enhancing, you can look at something that's working in one domain, and you can template it and bring it to many other domains. As I mentioned, anticipate is a big driver of the ideate method. Because change leads to entrepreneurial opportunity, there are 4 major types of change that present opportunity. Research tells us that social and demographic change, technological change, political and regulatory change, and industrial/market change all yield entrepreneurial ideas. And so when we break out in groups in a few minutes, we're going to look at this massive societal change that COVID has thrust upon us. And we're going to unpack that a little bit to see which ideas come to the forefront in our own community. But let me go through anticipate in a little bit of detail first, so you have some examples of how this works. So for instance, let's tackle social and demographic change, because I think if you just use that one area of change alone, you can come up with 100 ideas. So COVID is an example of an immense change that is occurring in our society. The media portrays the negative aspects of this awful virus and make sure that we're aware of that, but all change presents opportunity. Other changes going on in the United States, we have an increase in obesity. We have an increase in childhood obesity. We have an aging population in the United States. Our birth rate is 1.7, so we're not replacing ourselves, which means that as a population, we are growing older. And we have an increased proportion of Spanish-speaking individuals in the United States. All 4 of these changes yield opportunity. Okay, so if you're dealing with increased obesity, you can look at lots of different things to tackle this problem. You can look at nutrition, you can look at exercise, you can look at some sort of screening mechanisms that might help predict people that may struggle with obesity and try to help them earlier on in life so that they won't have it develop into a problem. With childhood obesity, you may have education where you could teach them about the issues related with obesity and aging over time. Could be that physical fitness and physical education in schools has been declining. So maybe there's an opportunity for private physical fitness or physical education that exists in an aftercare format. Aging population, we have a lot of people, as I mentioned with the Eversound example, with people in senior assisted living facilities that needed help with hearing. It could be that they need more care, or that they need socialization, or that they need help with learning new technology. There's all sorts of opportunity that presents itself there. And of course, with increased proportion of Spanish-speaking individuals, you have a lot of businesses that cater to that growing demographic. And if you can make it easier, perhaps you make something that will translate languages easier, or other ideas that are tailored to that segment specifically, you have a large and growing segment of customers that would really appreciate more focused attention. So this is just one of the 4 major areas of change, but the bottom line is change leads to entrepreneurial opportunities. And there's a lot of reasons why that happens. One is that when there is a new change, it is in fact new. So there is no competition yet. So it's not like you have big established companies there satisfying this need. And so it's kind of more an open territory, and it's much more amenable to entrepreneurs getting into a new space and taking advantage of it. Very difficult if you're an entrepreneur to enter an established industry where you have known large companies that have gone through the learning curve and have achieved economies of scale. Very difficult to compete there if you're a startup. But on the basis of change, there's a lot of new opportunity that has not yet been seized. It's a much more level playing field for entrepreneurs. So you could go through social and demographic change. You could also look at technological changes, political and regulatory changes, and industrial and market changes. These are all areas that are rife with opportunity. And then target. Target is you have to have an idea of who is going to need your idea, right? And so Steve Blank is the founder of the Lean Startup Movement, and he asked a very important question, and that is, to whom am I selling and why should they buy from us? You always have to have a target market customer in mind and get clarity on who the target is. So here is a product that came out about 10 years ago, and it's called the Can-Am Spyder. Okay, and this product is interesting looking. It is a 3-wheel motorcycle, right? As you can see, the 2 wheels are in the front, the 1 wheel is in the back, and I've never driven one, but from what I've been told, they're super fun to drive. But if you look at the dynamics of it, you'll also say it's super fun, but it's safer than a motorcycle because it's got 3 wheels instead of 2 wheels. And so people could go and buy this product. It sold for about $18,000, not as a primary vehicle. This is probably not going to be your daily commuting vehicle. This is your Sunday drive, fun vehicle where you could go out and take a motorcycle type ride, but it's much safer, right? So the target of this product is 35 to 39-year-old married men with children that make over $100,000 per year. Okay, now that's pretty specific as it gets to a target market, and entrepreneurs always have to start with a very specific target market. The simple reason is that if they have too broad of a target market, they don't have the resources to reach that market, those markets in a cost-effective way. But if you know that you have 35 to 39-year-old married men with children that make over $100,000 a year, statistically, those people only live in small segments of the United States, right? In any kind of numbers. You may have those people littered throughout the United States, but in terms of concentrated numbers, they live in the suburbs of major cities. They live around New York, they live around Chicago, they live around San Francisco, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and that very much led to where they would begin their operations. That's where they started to sell. That's where they located their dealerships. And that was, having that target in mind, helped them to get traction. And now that it's been out there for 10 years, you see people of different ages and different genders driving these vehicles. But in the initial point, you've got to start with the group of customers that wants and needs it the most in order to have a hope of getting traction, number one, and number two, reaching them in a cost-effective way. And the good thing about having a tightly defined target market, 35 to 39-year-old married men with children that make over $100,000 per year, is that often those people listen to the same music, they listen to the same podcasts, they read the same blogs. And so once you know this about them, reaching them is much more cost effective. And so once you hone in on the needs of a target, you could also begin to ideate around what else might this target market need, right? Once you become very intimately familiar with this group, you can begin to figure out what else might they need, right? And so one of the things that I tell my students all the time, I ask them, have you ever gotten a gift from a loved one, someone, maybe your parents or a sibling or a close friend or someone that you might be dating, someone that knows you really well, and they've given you a gift. And of course, you're polite because they've given you a gift. But as soon as you get it, you're thinking, oh my goodness, I hate that color, or I would never use that product, or I would never do that activity. Right? And when I ask my students that question, I said, has that ever happened to you? I've never had it where less than 100% of students don't raise their hand, because it's happened to us all. And so if you don't know what somebody that is intimately close to you might want, how is it that an entrepreneur can pretend to know what a whole target market of strangers might want? And so you've got to start small, and you've got to start specific and have that clear target in mind in order to generate the kind of intimacy necessary to meet their needs. And the last part of the ideate method is evaluation. How do you take all of these ideas? And by the way, for each letter in the acronym, you're supposed to generate 10 ideas. That gets you to 50. And then once you learn how to evaluate, we then ask you to go back and start from scratch and generate 50 more. And this evaluation process is where you look at your passion for the idea, you look at the size of the market, you look at the perceived need. Does the world really need this? You look at whether or not the degree to which it's really and truly a migraine headache problem. And so you rigorously assess the ideas, and then that generates a score for each idea. And the higher the score, the better. And that helps you narrow it down to first your best 10 ideas. And then we have a more rigorous testing process that narrows it down to 3, and ultimately your very best entrepreneurial idea. And then once you've got that best idea, then we ask you to create an idea board, which basically enables you to flesh this idea out in a manner which would help you communicate it well to other people, to people that might want to invest in your idea, to people that might want to give you advice on your idea, to people that might want to buy your idea. It's really important to be able to reduce your idea to the most effective communication. And so this idea board, by the way, this is being recorded, and all of these materials will be available through Idea City and will be posted on the website. And so feel free to use our idea board. It's there for your use, but this is basically just a way of you fleshing out the idea in a way that will help you communicate it at a high level. So remember, a ship is safe in harbor, but that's not what ships are for. I think perhaps one of the most painful things is to come up with a really valuable idea and do nothing, only to watch somebody else capitalize on it a few years later. That cannot be a fun experience. And I certainly hope that that does not happen to anybody here, because once you come up with that one really great idea, then of course you're just beginning, because from there it takes action and it takes commitment and it takes putting some work in to flesh it out. And there are no guarantees. You might put in a lot of work and it may not work out, but without taking that action, you know for certain it's not going to work out. So you've got to go for it. And as they say, you can't steal second base and keep your foot on first base. At some point, you really have to make a run for it. So I think we are right on schedule. And what I would like to do now is take a couple of minutes and talk about the group assignment. And then we're going to ask you to break up into some groups and put the ideate method into play. And so what we want this to be very much a communal feeling. And so we would like for you to briefly introduce yourself, your name, your occupation, your connection to the Winston-Salem entrepreneurial, artistic innovation ecosystem, if that applies. And then we just briefly went through the ideate method. You've now learned a little bit about what makes ideas valuable, where to discover them, where to look for these ideas, how to make a good idea better, how to use change and anticipate that change as an engine for generating valuable ideas, how to figure out who might benefit from this idea by targeting, which group of customers has the greatest want or need. And then we talked very briefly about how to evaluate ideas. And so if you as a group could work on developing valuable ideas that you think might help or add value to Winston-Salem, particularly on the heels of going through this rough 1-year deal with COVID, and write them down and appoint one person in your group as a communicator, so that when we come back together and debrief, someone can share your great thinking with the whole community. That would be fantastic. And while you are going through this process, Martha and Stephanie and Kelsa and Donovan and I will be joining your groups to add value or to help you go through this method as you generate valuable ideas. So we will be there to help as you work in groups. And then when we come back together, let me check the time here. I believe we're going to come back together at about 5:35 or 5:40 to debrief, and then we'll have time for the debrief and any kind of Q&A. I am going to pause there to see if my team wants to add anything to where we are at this moment in time.
That all sounds good. Does anybody have questions about breakouts or what you're supposed to do in your breakouts?
I'm going to suggest also that maybe people, hi everyone, Stephanie Pereira from New Ink. Maybe if you have the ability to screenshot the assignment so that when we go into breakouts, you have it in front of you.
I'll also send it around via broadcast in case you can't screenshot. All right.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So with that, if you would just go into your breakout groups, I think the hosts are going to be inviting you to join. So please feel free to join and share and come up with some valuable ideas using the ideate method. And then we will see you in your groups and then look forward to the debrief afterwards.
Back. All right.
I hear there was lots of attrition when the rubber hit the road and it was time for people to start actually ideating. So, cowards.
And here we are. Well, it'd be nice to hear a bit of a share back from each of the groups. I'm happy to go group by group, or Dan, if you want to. Group 1. Do you all have a spokesperson?
I'm group 1 spokesperson. Oh man, we have to go first. That's even more pressure. So we kind of talked collectively a lot about childcare for teachers. Has been a big thing that we discussed, and I'm gonna kind of tag team this with one of my teammates, so I'll let him elaborate on that one. But the other two that we talked about were thinking about vaccine distribution for children, because that next wave is coming up. Specifically, I teach 8th grade, so specifically thinking about that middle school population of students, potentially using schools as vaccine sites. Then we ran into the problem of we don't have enough nurses in our schools, so that those two could kind of hand in hand work together. And we talked about public transit in Winston-Salem as being a problem. Unrealistic loops, it's inconvenient, and kind of needing to upgrade all different types of public transit, be it buses, be it scooters, anything like that. And I'm going to let Dr. Brown talk about the childcare for teachers.
Mm.
Hey, and I'll be quick, but the one thing we talked about, and I've had this idea for a little while, and I'm not really the person to go run with it, but one of the very few instances that we have really across the nation that school systems can control about teacher attrition is childcare. And it's not necessarily one of the biggest, but it is one of the few that are in more the locus of control. And obviously we've seen, particularly for women, they're leaving jobs, we know, left and right, and in the major portion of teachers and employees in school systems are made up of young women. And so anyways, one thing we talked about is in some places, I've seen this mostly in rural areas, school systems have their own childcare situations where teachers are paying in to that system for childcare. So their system is not only providing the child care and the preschool teachers to support it during the school day, but then they're making the money. The money is going back into the school system. The other benefit of that is you have teachers then who might be being trained in the preschool settings who might want to become teachers at the K-12 level down the road. So a lot of pros and a lot of benefits to that, but unfortunately that's been an issue in Winston as well as many other places.
Great. That's great. Yeah, I'm curious to hear if this theme around childcare comes up in other groups. It's definitely something that I know a lot of businesses have been talking about as we prepare for reentry. So thank you, Bailey. Thank you, Alan. And since Bailey noted that I called group 1 first, I'm going to switch it up and call group 6 to go next. You all have a spokesperson?
I am the spokesperson. Hi, I'm Mona King. I'm a resident of Winston-Salem, and my cohort in this discussion was Alan Younger, and Alan was doing this while he was walking, so it was great. And Donovan also joined us for a bit. We talked about the problems with COVID, part of which pre-existed before COVID, but now have been made even greater because of COVID, is the creative community having to work in isolation, and meaning not a lot of creatives had studios and would work out of their homes or smaller spaces, and then we were forced to work out of our homes. So we were no longer able to network and collaborate or even get together for events. And a problem that has been in Winston for as long as I've been here, for 30 years, is studio space. Adequate, functional, affordable, safe studio space, and a space that even it would accommodate collaborating. We have a lot of spaces that have been created in this past recently, like Mixer, which is basically a maker space. We have co-working spaces, which basically is your laptop and you work among other people in the technology field, but a space where creatives, including visual, music, spoken word, any type of creative where you need space to spread out, to ideate, to work with other people in the creative industry, does not exist in Winston. And we talked about maybe we could partner with the universities. Well, the universities have to dedicate that space to students. And quite a lot of the space and time is for the students, because as a student in the arts, we don't have regular hours. Hours are very much extended, so the space is being used by the students and faculty. So we looked at some existing spaces that are very positive for people in the creative arena. There's an organization called Authoring Action, and they help students with spoken word, and that space really makes them feel comfortable in that environment. So the space would have to make creatives feel comfortable. Like, yes, you need white walls for a photography studio, but every space in the studio could not be white. That's impossible to be creative that way. We'd also like it to be a space created for artists and managed by artists. And I guess the big thing or obstacle or challenge is to prove to investors or people who would help us to create this space, what are the benefits? What are they going to get out of it? How is it going to help or provide their return on investment. But we know that it will create jobs, opportunities, income for artists to become sustainable, and also create opportunities for us to have further exposure outside of the local community. So we covered a lot. And we also know that there's still a lot more that can be discussed.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Mona. I
You're welcome.
love this spin on profitability as also community benefit. It's really
Yes.
important. Thank you for that. Keep popping around. How about group 3? We have someone to share out.
Yeah, are we group 3? I think I will go group 3. So, well, thank you. My name is Carla. We had such a great conversation and so many ideas. It felt like 100, but we narrow out to couple ones, and one which is not new, probably some people that I can see here that we have talked in the past about the navigation system for, especially for minority communities, for the resources and tools in Winston-Salem. You know, when you want to put a small business or you have an idea, it is so hard to navigate, not just as a new arrival, but just generally speaking. And we have so many great organizations, profit, non-profit, and it's a problem that is every year is the same theme. So how can we have like a navigation system that we can connect with the government side of how to create a business to the creative and the resources and tools of the city to connect the vibrant community that we have, right, as an entrepreneurs. And it sounds at the same time so easy, or like, oh, like everybody can think of that idea, but it hasn't been resolved and it's a big issue. And last year was more evident with you know, the minority community not able to know or access certain tools, because they just you know, it is harder just to know. So it's not just the communication problem, but so that is a navigation system for that is connected to various, and we're not the only city that has that issue, but it's when you think about how amazing of vibrant community we have for entrepreneurs, and at the same time we still have that same issue. So how can we be more technology wise to fix it? Mm-hmm. So it's of course spaces, but I think technology wise we can do something about that. And that's what we were talking in our group, which was Penny and Laura. And the other one was mentorship for underserved communities. So when you think about other great organizations doing mentorship, some of these are one-to-one or you commit to a certain time, but the reality sometimes time is hard, or for communities like the Latino community to create a network that you can have access to quality mentors, it becomes harder, right? So if it's a way to create an app that is really, really catered to Latino students where they can access mentors in the community, that will be the step number 1. But 2, maybe abroad, right? Can be any part of the nation where they know this app, it is catered. It is other mentor apps, but I think the difference can be made by really catering the needs of minority communities that do not have access to networking, or it will take them 10, 15, 20 years more, right, in effort for the type of I don't know how to call it, but environments that sometimes they're not allowed, or they're not able to get out as easier as others. So that's so yeah, I mean, resolving a couple of these problems with technology or apps, that will be our main ones that we talk about.
Thank you, Carla. I love that. I'm loving these threads around care. And I think, you know, what I'm hearing you say reminds me a lot of what we've seen pop up in mutual aid initiatives, but that have been largely not tech enabled. And that maybe we can keep that spirit alive, but with, you know, smart tech to help keep us ahead of the curve and in communication. It's really, really clever. Okay, we have to hear still from group 2. That was.
I'm not sure if we're group 2.
You were, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So I'm Ideation, and I was in the same group with Lisa, Margaret, and Delapo. And so we talked about 3 opportunities in the area regarding kids not having as much of an opportunity to play and socialize at this time as they normally would have due to COVID. And we thought about, I'll just go through the problems first and then come back to the solution or what we're thinking. And then inclusion in healthcare. So being able to communicate with people from multiple cultures about health and about emergencies. And then the third one was around people not being able to exercise as much and kind of have the same discipline that they probably had before, because a lot of times people were on Zoom a lot. And so those were 3 opportunities that we thought, COVID presents. And with the kids opportunity, we were talking about art infused STEM education, and kids having the opportunity to maybe even interact with kids from another country, and through using things that they have around them to engage with their needs in their community, like problems that they see in their community, and coming up with solutions through STEM education, but art infused. And so we had a lot of ideas, but those are some of the thoughts that we had. So yeah.
Great. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, deep problem spaces. I can feel how we're gonna take a lot of the weight and the bulk of this year plus into future projects, future initiatives. Thank you so much for sharing, Atakun. Love it. Okay, we still need to hear from, I think, rooms 4 and 5. Room 4. That was Eileen, Glenn.
Is that me? Yeah.
That's
Hi,
you.
how are you? So our group contained myself, Alana, and Glenn, and Dan, and we came up with about 4 different ideas. So we were pretty active. The first one we were talking about was a brew-through type idea. If you've ever been to the beach and seen a brew-through, or for young mothers particularly that, maybe coming from point A to point B and needed diapers or formula or something quick that they can just drive up, and not like a big box store, but something where they would have maybe 25, 30 items that you could just pick from and just grab on the way home. And even for people with mobility issues, that would be really great. You didn't get on your computer before you left work and remembered to order from the grocery store and had a timeline, but you just needed something really, from work to home or those kind of things. So we thought that was something that would be needed, especially during COVID, but at any time for those populations. The second idea was upfitting bicycles. A lot of people are riding bikes now and using it as a form of commuting. And so to have bags designed specifically for those bicycles to hold maybe a grocery or items that we shop for that, or big, a big gulp maybe holder for your drink type thing. And so that was a second idea we had. The third was, and I didn't know this, there's a backlog of orders for things like exercise equipment. So maybe gyms that would rent their equipment for short term. People spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a piece of equipment and then don't use it. So it might be nice to have a rental, an exercise equipment rental service where you could try it out for a month maybe, and then decide if you want it, and or maybe just for the meantime, I can't get to the gym for these X number of months. Can I rent that piece of equipment? And so those were some of the thoughts that we had. Those were 3 of them. And the last thing we were talking about is something around gardening. A lot of people are trying to grow their own. now for the first time, and just maybe an app or some kind of thing that would be helpful for people, particularly that would be geared toward a local community, because we grow things different here than in the South than we do in the North or the West. And so, you know, how do I garden and when do I plant and all those kind of things, and just have those, just an app that might be helpful, or maybe even have gardening consulting service. So those were lots of different ideas, but anybody else that was in my group, jump in if you want to elaborate in any way.
I'm seeing the thumbs up. Yeah, I love how, again, all of this is really close to the body, which is nice. And I just the other day I saw something that was like a rent the runway for apartment furniture. I love the idea of something like that for equipment. That's really, really cool. Thank you. All right, group 5, Martha, Shane, and Susan.
Okay, thank you. We spoke about how COVID has enabled some people to pursue interest to a greater degree, and that as we reemerge from COVID, people will not necessarily resume the same patterns. That is to say, they may decide they don't want to do the same kind of activities, or they may not keep up with all of the people they used to see, and they might seek other people. And we thought they would probably want to go deeper into some of the areas they've been interested in. And so how do you do that in a community? How do you connect with people? And we were thinking if there's a way that could join people who wanted to do nature walks, or who were interested in environmental issues, or wanted to have French conversation, or you know, foreign affairs, or various things, or hobbies of many sorts. Because I think people are going to be looking to leave exclusively visual connection in these areas and find sort of kindred spirits. And so they might keep their core COVID friends, but they might drop a lot of other people that they've sort of been seeing, and look for people who are have similar interests. So that would be one of the things we've thought about. A corollary to that is the whole issue of vaccines, and there's a lot of controversy about having a vaccine passport. But you know, how do you are people who've had vaccines probably readily say they've had them and feel safer knowing about groups when they've had them. So that was something else. And then I was trying to think about Winston-Salem and just promoting it as a place for people to go. But how do you get the word out about what's actually there? Because people often leave cities to go to places where other people from those same cities are. But do people know that there's a vibrant arts community in Winston-Salem, or you can get a direct flight there, things like that. So.
Thank you for that. That's great. I think, yeah, that the community building that we've done in COVID, the community building that we're hungry for post-COVID around shared interests and skills.
Yeah. I think we all have to assume and remind ourselves that the behavior won't be exactly the same after COVID. People will be seeking out new things, or they'll go in different directions. So as individuals and as organizations, I think it's helpful to be aware of that.
Yeah, there's some freedom in that too.
I am blown away by the idea quality. Wow, what's just tremendous ideas to the benefit of Winston-Salem and beyond. And I would just like to invite the group a couple of things. One is on April 22nd, at 6 o'clock, we're gonna have an evening with Ben Sutton, and he's gonna tell his great story of founding what became IMG, one of the greatest sports marketing companies in the world, and his story of how he came from a very humble beginning to becoming one of the country's best entrepreneurs will be at 6 o'clock. And then there will also be Tank, which is Deacon Springboard, our early stage accelerator program presentations, and Startup Lab, which is our marquee program. If you're interested in coming to this event on April 22nd, please email the Center for Entrepreneurship's Administrative Coordinator, Cindy Baker. Her email is bakerc@wfu.edu. We'd love to have you on April 22nd at 6 p.m. And if you're interested in a deeper dive in the Ideate method, you can buy the Ideate method book on Amazon. And we also just created an online course for the Ideate method. If you're interested in that, you can feel free to email me at cohenda, COHENDA, at wfu.edu. And then if you're just generally interested in entrepreneurship, broad spectrum, could be for-profit, could be not-for-profit, please visit the Center for Entrepreneurship at entrepreneurship.wfu.edu. We would love to engage with you. We do lots of great events and speeches, etc. We would love to have the community become more involved with our center. Thank you all so much for participating and sharing so much of yourselves with the group.
Thank you so much, Dan. We're so lucky to have you. Thank you, everyone. I love these ideas. I hope they become real.
Thank you.
If I could, before we part ways, I do want to make one more announcement. Let's give Dan another round of applause. And family, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today and your warm ideas. I feel motivated and excited after today's conversation. I just want to give you a couple more opportunities to engage with the Idea City Winston-Salem programming series. So recently we've teamed up with Forbes 30 Under 30 ed tech company, Movers and Shakers, to design a series of augmented reality or 3D monuments to local Black and Brown and Indigenous historical figures from Winston-Salem who sort of reflect the arts and social justice ethos of the city. The monuments will be featured in an app called Kinfolk AR. That app is actually already available in the App Store. Definitely encourage you to download it. Currently, Kinfolk AR features 3D monuments dedicated to Frederick Douglass, Shirley Chisholm, Bayard Rustin, and others. They also include primary source documents as well. It's really targeting middle and high school students and social studies educators, but it's a really great opportunity for us as a city because we're the first city that Movers and Shakers has worked with, and they look to take this project on the road throughout the country and develop a database really of these augmented reality monuments to unsung heroes throughout our nation's history. We will launch that app with the Winston-Salem Monuments and Kinfolk AR on Thursday, May 13th at a community launch event. It will also be virtual, but that's Thursday, May 13th at 5 p.m. Where the developers will walk you through a demo and do all sorts of cool stuff to show you how the app works. Also this fall, we are a 3-day immersive workshop series for creative entrepreneurs called Camp. Essentially, we will revisit some of the core themes that we reflected on throughout the Idea City experience. That is rethinking norms, workforce development, and scale, really aimed at targeting our creative entrepreneurs in the city. We're looking to recruit about 30 to 35 entrepreneurs who are interested in a professional development opportunity. Our friends at New Inc. will be coming down to lead in these workshops around those 3 themes, and applications for camp will be made available in early fall. Camp will take place in person at Innovation Quarter on November 9th through 11th. So stay tuned to our website, ideacity.events.wfu.edu for more information, and I'll be sure to drop all of that in the chat. But without further ado, again, I just want to thank Dan, our partners at New Inc., and all the family that has made this place their home for this afternoon. We're really grateful to have been able to fellowship with you today, and we look forward to doing it again very soon. Peace and love, y'all.